Thank you all. Whether or not you are a big fan of this truth, there's something about our world, historically, across generations, across all times, across all cultures, that has this historical obsession with royalty. And there are probably a bunch of reasons for this, but we just eat this stuff up. We just eat it up. I mean, our most famous television shows right now, or many of them recently, have been surrounding this idea, like The Crown and The Tudors and The Great and Royals and Reign. Disney animation has relied on this idea from the very beginning. The concept of princes and princesses and people who are ordinary people who become princesses and princes, and we eat it up. An estimated 1 billion people watch the wedding of Princess Diana. 1 billion. No matter how you feel about governmental structures or cultural makeup, you can't deny the reality that we pay attention to this. And in some way, to one way or another, to each of us, it really matters. And I've been to some of the most significant places in royal history. That is the Stone of Scone, which was in Edinburgh Castle. Like most great things from Scotland, the English took it away. And so now it actually is in England, and it sits when a new royal is crowned in England, it sits underneath the throne, the Stone of Scone, and it's been used since 1249. It's believed to have been the pillow that Jacob used from the Bible when he rested his head and had the dream of Jacob's ladder. Somehow it ended up in Scotland. The Scots had it. That's where the royals were crowned. The English thought it was a great idea, so they took it. I have seen the place that is the chapel where Mary, Queen of Scots, was crowned queen at only 9 months old. That is in Stirling, Scotland, inside of Stirling Castle. I visited the Holyrood House, which is the royal residence in Edinburgh. And one of the coolest thrones I've ever seen was actually a throne of baseball bats at the Negro League Museum in Kansas City, which, of course, resembles another famous pop culture throne, which is the Iron Throne from HBO's Game of Thrones, which, if you know anything about Game of Thrones, is the object of desire of all of the clans and tribes inside of the Game of Thrones. Now, me personally, maybe you're like me. It drives my wife a little crazy because she's about it sometimes. I don't get monarchy. I just don't get it. It makes me appreciative. This sounds probably very patriotic, but it makes me appreciative of growing up around democracy. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's because of the way that, growing up in America, just that American ethos of everything is earned and nothing is given, right? At its core. Of course, we break the rule all the time, because here's the thing. As American as I am and how much I hate this idea, do you know, if I'm born into the royal family, I'm not denouncing any of that, probably. I'm just enjoying it, right? But I'm not sure how I feel about all of this stuff all of the time. And so it gives me this, sort of judgmental elitism about it, that in a weird sort of way, that even though I'm not as rich, I'm not as powerful, I'm not as important, I'm not as whatever, somehow I believe, by looking at it through this lens, that I am better because I don't fall victim to said trap, right? When really, if I would just look at myself in reality, do you know what I would find? I would find that I have made myself the king of my own life. I might not be the king of England or the king of a state or the king of a country or have any sort of royal title, but I have chosen to make myself the king of my own life. I have crowned so many kings and queens in my own life. I have crowned my own comfort. I have made a monarch out of my money. I have made a royal out of my reputation. I have made nobility out of my own knowledge. I have made a princess out of my personal plans. But none of these things are worthy of my worship. Not a single one. Because ultimately, if I am worshiping these things, then I'm really worshiping myself. if I'm placing these things that have to do with me on the throne of my life, maybe I'm swapping one for another, or all of them collectively exist there, really I'm saying, I am the one who sits on the throne, who is ultimately worthy of everything, and the world ought to revolve around me. Because the truth of no matter who we are, whether we are religious or not religious, whether we are agnostic or atheist, whatever, we all worship something. Every single one of us. Something in our lives becomes the object of our desire, the object of our faith, and the object of our allegiance in our worship. It will naturally happen. It might be our work, it might be our family, it might be our kids, it might be our relationship, it might be money, it might be our reputation, it might be pride, I don't know, whatever it might be. But one way, something or another is going to become the object of my highest allegiance. And no matter what, because we're human, it will always end up being some form or another of putting myself on the throne, no matter what it is. Even if you're pious enough to think, well, I don't put myself on the throne, I put others on the throne, then I would say you probably worship your own pride because you are bragging about how selfless you are, right? So in some way, one way or another, we worship ourselves. But if you're anything like me, when I really examine this on my own life, do you know what happens when I do this? Isolation happens and loneliness happens because I don't prioritize relationships. I don't prioritize others. My sense of self is so much more fragile because I'm so much more threatened by anything that happens circumstantially in my life, like failure or rejection. And all of this happens because when I view myself as the most worthy, it means that I have to, by nature, view anything else as less than worthy, as unworthy or as not worthy enough. So when I place anything unworthy on the throne of my life, I'm putting myself on the throne, choosing to make myself the worthy one, and when I do that, I suffer, and so does everybody else. And so no matter how many times we try, we find that this doesn't work. Crowning ourselves king or queen is not an effective way to live. It hurts us and it hurts other people. So what do? Who else is worthy of it? Because if I'm not worthy of it, then there's nobody else in the world who's worthy of it either. What's the solution? The funny thing is, it might be a different way about going about it, but all of us hunt this very thing. By putting ourselves on the throne, we are hunting for something to worship, and it just makes sense that we would choose ourselves. But if there was something that we could put on the throne that was worthy, that was actually worthy, then it would change everything. And that's exactly the picture that we get in Revelation chapter 5. In Revelation 5, we find an image of heaven where these struggles of identity are gone. It says this in Revelation 5:11-14. Then I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands, and 10,000 times 10,000. They encircled the throne and living creatures and the elders. In a loud voice they were saying, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise." Then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea and all that is in them saying, "To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honor and glory and power forever and ever." The four living creatures said, "Amen," and the elders fell down and worshiped. If you remember last week, I talked about how Revelation is often avoided by preachers like me because the church has kind of misused it. It's a really complicated book to understand, and so through this, we're trying to sort of recapture the image of Revelation and how we view it and how we understand it. And I think it's because it's written in poetry, it's written in code, it's hard to get. And so this is, I think, a perfect example of how we get lost in some things in Revelation that I don't want to say don't matter, they just don't matter the most. When we view a passage like this, We hear something about angels and about 10,000 times 10,000 people and living creatures and elders, and we can get so captivated by what does that mean? What living creatures? And who are the elders? And who are angels? And how do they relate to us? We get caught up in all of these questions, confused by what this means, that we miss the forest from the trees. Because we focus on that instead of focusing on what's the point of the passage? What is the point of what it is that we're trying to read? Well, what we find is, I think, if we can separate ourselves from some of the weirdness of it, because it feels foreign. But what's not foreign in the passage? What's not foreign in the passage just says, John says, yes, there's angels, yes, there's living creatures, yes, there's animals, yes, there's elders. What does all that mean? You know what it means? John also says that there are people there. That there are people there. We might not know what everything else is, but John says, but that's where you should be. This is a picture of heaven. This is humans, you and me together. And at the beginning of Revelation 5, it starts by talking about a scroll that's sealed, and no one is worthy of opening the scroll. Think about this. John says, every creature of all, this is heaven, every creature of all time, everything ever created is here. Trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions are surrounding this circle of praise and worship. Myriads and myriads of all living creatures are there, and not one of them are worthy to open the scroll. But there is only one, as we see this sort of, I brought a picture, Sally, of these concentric circles. And I apologize, but on the screen I didn't mention. These concentric circles, where you see one type of being around the throne, and another type of being inside of them, and another type of being inside of them, and another type of being inside of them. Countless. Anything that's ever been made, any living creature ever is there on the screen. But there is only one who sits upon the throne in the center of the circle. There is only one who is worthy to sit on that throne. And so John gives us a very different picture of what the world is supposed to look like. Because this is very different than how you and I run our world. Because what normally happens, if we kind of take the same picture of these circles, all of those living creatures in the circles are competing against one another, fighting to sit in the middle. We fight tooth and nail all of the time to put ourselves on the throne, to fight for our own agenda, to do what's best for us. Everybody else be damned, who cares? Because I'm number one, and I deserve to sit there. And when we place ourselves as the monarch of our own lives, we fool ourselves into believing that all of heaven and earth bend to our whims and bow at our feet. The problem with that is you don't got to be alive but for 5 seconds to realize it didn't work that way. But we try and try and try and try and try to make it work anyway. But it simply doesn't happen. Which is why John says that no one is worthy to open this scroll. Trying to do what we do has only ever led to loneliness and isolation and war and any kind of ism. But then, in this picture of heaven, they've encountered the one who is worthy. And the arguments of worthiness just have to end in the presence of this God. There are no arguments to be made. There's no discussion here. All of these creatures know where they belong in this situation, and it is to surround the one on the throne with praise, undeniably worthy of every single thing. But what is it that makes God worthy of praise? Why should we just assume that God is the only one? Why can't it be us? So some people feel this disconnect. That some people will say, well, if God created me, then therefore God deserves my praise because I've been given the gift of life. Okay, maybe. But that's not what the passage actually says, because the passage tells us why they believe God to be worthy. Here's what it says. Their song that the people proclaim, that all of the trillions of creatures in this circle are saying together, is worthy is the Lamb who was slain. What is it that makes God worthy of praise and worthy of worship and worthy of it all? It's God's ultimate and perfect self-sacrificial love for you and for me, and for all creatures. It is God's willingness to lay God's self down that we might benefit. What makes God different? It's because God is the only one of all of these creatures who is not fighting to sit in the middle. He's fighting to push us in the middle. You see, in your life and in your worship and in the way that you serve, the most important thing to God is you. And to the person to your left and to your right and behind you and in front of you and in the world around you. And this alone is the only thing that makes God worthy. That every moment in this lamb who was slain's eternal existence has been an act of sacrifice so that all of creation surrounding the throne might benefit. That even creation itself is an act of self-sacrifice. Because the triune God needed nothing and yet chose to create knowing that creation would turn. But chose to sacrifice that we would benefit from life and from love. Worthiness is found in sacrificial love. And it's not exactly the picture that we get from this passage, that it's not about us, it's about everyone. It says, "Then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea and all that is in them saying, praise and honor and glory to the one on the throne, whom alone is worthy." Who is it that benefits from the sacrifice of this worthy one? What does it say? I heard every creature on the earth, in the earth, below the earth, above the earth, around the earth, doesn't matter. Every creature is praising this worthy one. This is who benefits from the loving sacrifice of this worthy God. Every creature in earth, under the earth, and on the sea. This is a picture of God's inclusivity. John gives us a picture. Remember what we're talking about here. What are we getting a picture of? This is an image of heaven. And John says, you're supposed to be there because God's love has brought you there. Not because you are worthy, but because the one in the center of the throne is worthy and because you recognize his worthiness. And because all are there are no limits to who is included in God's perfect and sacrificial love. So rather than competing for the throne, when we give praise to the one who is worthy, then everyone has the place that they're fighting for. Because we love and sacrifice so much for one another that we are all worthy, we are all valued, and none of us question it so much we have to fight for the throne because we've been given a seat at the table in the kingdom of God. And so how can we though make sure that it is the worthy one that I'm worshiping and not myself? It's a tricky game. We talked about at the beginning of this message how even when I think I serve others, I might actually be serving myself. So how can we keep this in balance? When everything is competing for our worship, when everything is competing for our attention, when we are tempted to place ourselves on the throne, how can we worship the only one who is worthy? What does that mean? What does that look like? The answer is found in the passage. It's sacrificing for others. How can we make sure that we are worshiping this worthy God? By imitating the worthiness of this God, which is found in his sacrifice. By sacrificing so that everyone comes into the circle in their rightful place, welcomed in this kingdom. If we want to know the answer to the question of whether or not I'm worshiping myself or God, we can at least begin with the question of, am I sacrificing for others? Is this really for other people to benefit, no matter what I'm doing? Because I think if the church was genuinely filled with these kind of people, not just this church, but all churches, were genuinely filled with this kind of people, the world would not be the way that it is. We would not have so many people who are not welcome inside of this circle of praise. We would not have so many people who do not feel welcome because they do not have what they need to feel sustained and worthy and valued and loved in this world, that they can't join in the praise. As the world pines for our attention and as we desire for the world to revolve around us, let us revolve around the only one who is worthy. And we do that by sacrificing for others. And we live this out as a church. And I'm proud to say we live this out in a variety of ways. If you think